All right. Here with the usual suspects. Sina, Mikey, Louie, Nora, Joe, and Alex. So a bigger group. Thank you all for coming today. It's been a while since we convened. And just chronologically, what did we have happen? I'm gonna have to go in reverse order. So yesterday, Hezbollah hit a number of targets, Haifa, an air base, Ramat David Air Base, and a factory, a Rafael factory, high tech factory. And they said that those were in response to the attacks in Beirut and the pager massacre and the two-way radio massacre, which happened on the previous set of days. Nasrallah spoke. It was interesting because it was like the pager massacre happened and Nasrallah spoke and he kind of had this confidence. And so, in terms of the emotional ups and downs, for me, it was like, okay, all right, got this confidence, and then the next day there was all this huge other assassination of like a whole bunch of top commanders of Hezbollah's elite force, and so that was just like another shocking kind of event. Um, and then Hezbollah's response happened. Um, those were like the things that I guess the major things that I've been thinking about that are on my mind right now. I actually think there were probably a whole ton of other stuff that happened before that that's been kind of erased in my consciousness because things are going so fast and so many different massacres. And I mean, I don't know if we kind of talked about the invasion of the West Bank that's, I guess, still underway. Um, Gaza fighting is still underway. I don't know if we talked about the Palestine missile that Yemen hit uh, some somewhere near Tel Aviv with. So there's just been so much going on, and it's been really until yesterday. It was a lot of I had a lot of fear of like maybe maybe there's like after day one, pager massacre, right? Walkie-talkie massacre. Nasrallah tries to get some kind of calm, and then another big massacre in Beirut. And I was like, oh my God, what's day five? Like, what have they got? What are they going to do next? And so it was a lot of fear for me. Like, it was a lot of, I was really scared. And, in that time too, the Macklemore song came out, Hinds Hall too. And like, I can't actually read the lyrics out without crying, especially his part when he makes this vow to the children of Gaza. So I've been listening to that. My kids are listening to that. They're singing along. So yeah, I mean, I don't, I'm just like happy to be here with you guys. Um, I feel like there's been just, I can't really describe one theme except maybe some sense of fear, and then there is some kind of deterrence. Like it's clear that Hezbollah is trying to restore deterrence with what they did yesterday. And now we have to wait and see what the next escalation is. The one thing I said yesterday was like, as much as maybe the ground war will start or maybe it won't, but like it's hard to imagine things calming down from here. It's hard to imagine things going back to a calmer state than they were. And yeah, so that's it. I mean, that's where I'm at. Whoever wants to go next.
Everybody jumping all at once. Um, I guess I'll go. Um, yeah, I feel very worn out by this week. By the last, I mean, yeah, the last like 2 weeks particularly. Um, uh, yeah, as you mentioned, like the invasion of the West Bank, the uh what's happening in Lebanon right now. I mean, just seeing the images of like the Israeli army, um, these like convoys of like flatbed trucks with these massive tanks and other armored vehicles like heading toward the north. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. And then, the massacres are continuing in Gaza. I think there were some people, who are saying, well, like they can't possibly like keep doing these routine massacres in Gaza if they're also, preparing to invade South Lebanon, and they're doing the wide scale invasion of the West Bank and bombing Syria at the same time. Like, maybe it'll finally like quiet down a little bit in Gaza. And it won't be this, I think even you talked about this in one of your sit reps, Justin, recently. Like, it won't be this um, you know, sharply clear indication that that um, Israel's operation in Gaza will be done because they have to fight all these other fronts. It'll be like this like very slow kind of like whimper instead of a bang. But that hasn't happened either. I mean, just yesterday there was yet another massacre. It really is like every Saturday they commit another slaughter in another shelter for displaced people, whether it's on the beach or whether they're in like a school, a kindergarten, um, another facility that has already been bombed, several times, sometimes before in the last almost 12 months. And like, I just, yeah, it's been hard to, uh, for me to try and like, hold on to, you like, uh, the feeling of, y- the knowledge that it's not gonna get better right now. It is going to get worse before it gets better. And that I know intellectually, but it's really like tearing my soul apart. Um, how can it get worse? I mean, I remember saying, how can it get worse, 20 years ago, uh, when I was in Gaza and the West Bank? Like, how can it possibly get worse than this? And then, like, every day for the last 12 months, it's gotten worse in Gaza every 10 minutes. And then there's no possible way that Israel can da da da. And Israel does, because it's a psychotic and belligerent and arrogant and empowered, you know, colony of terror. And seeing seeing how the corporate media in this country, and I'm sure in Europe, and in Canada, uh, framed the pager terrorist attacks and then the walkie-talkie attacks the next day, like as like innovative or clever, or like, um, we have like heads of state joking about it on national television. We have like US politicians threatening protesters with like, don't pick up your pager today. Like, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with all of this. Just like I continue to be in total disbelief at just the like level of putrid, um, disgusting arrogance that Western Empire exhibits on a minute to minute basis, and how that plays out in terms of the ongoing support of this like vile settler colony in West Asia. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just like trying to hang on like all you folks. And I'm very very grateful that we have this cadre and that we have the people who watch this. And I just feel like, yeah, we just have to hang on.
You know, I had this thought, I didn't want to tweet it, but I was just like, I keep imagining like in World War II, if we were all on social media, like Soviets and Nazis and everybody together, and then the Nazis after every act in the Holocaust would like proudly tweet it out and taunt the Jewish community and taunt the communists, like, look what we did now. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty much how it would be. We would be like all on this shared internet with and like I remember that was that some of the reactions that I saw, like it would be like these like professional pro-Israel people like Eve Bartlow or whatever her name is, and like Aviva something, and they're just like they're talking about it like first person. They're like, you asked us to be precise, and I'm like, you weren't planning this opera. You didn't have anything to do with this. Like, you didn't know about this. What are you talking about? And but like they want to identify with
Yeah.
that like huge massacre, and there's that hedge fund guy who was like, we're not silent. Somebody said, I can't believe the world is silent in the face of this massacre, and this hedge fund guy was like, we're not silent, we're celebrating. And it's like, that's
They have boat tours off of Gaza
yeah,
to watch. Yeah, it's normal. It's normal for them. It's actually what's keeping them together throughout all of this.
yeah,
It's the only national force they have. Like, we have wasted a lot of time in our lives, like trying to understand the Israeli mind. And it's like, no, it's a mishmash of Slovakians, Americans, like, Ukrainians, rando, like little orphans, a bunch of people pretending to be Jewish on top of that just to like get a nice place to live. Like, you can't unite this project in any other way other than violence. Violence and like the wholesale, pleasure in celebrating over your enemy. And that's it. Like, that's all they have. So that's the only thing we'll see of them from now on.
Louis, did you want to go next, or
Yeah, sure,
Alex?
I'll go. Um, as always, pretty much fully agree with everything Nora said and that you've said. I've not been able to come to many of these for boring reasons, but I felt spiritually a part of it. And I think, yeah, both of you mentioned fear. I've definitely been feeling a lot of fear for Lebanon. And like you said, Nora, that feeling that, this is going to get worse one way or another, or it's certainly not going to get better quickly. And I think I was thinking about it earlier today. I think probably we're all feeling this in one way or another. I'm kind of like constantly recalibrating how to navigate the world, how to navigate life, because there's events happening in isolation that would derail you for days, and you don't even have time to be derailed because the next thing has happened. And then underlining all of that, these events are not going to stop. And as you start most of the sit reps, Justin, there's no end in sight. This is this is the long haul. It's not going to end anytime soon, but it's unsustainable to be in this kind of emergency. I think, but let's say before October, I think we all knew that feeling of, to use the obvious example, previous bombardments of Gaza, you'd go into kind of like panic mode. Your stomach would, and it would last. It wouldn't be that long. And then I think since, October, November, December, it's been that feeling of how do you continue to function, most importantly, continue to be useful, but at the same time not become callous or emotionally detached from what is happening. Not that I think there's any danger of that for certainly for myself or for any of us, but you know, do I feel that like visceral horror that I did as frequently in the first few months as frequently now? No, I don't. I think that's partly because you can't sustain it. It's partly self-preservation, but self-preservation for me in the service of continue to trying to be as useful as I can and not just becoming overwhelmed with horror or defeatism or despair. And I think, you know, just so many illusions have been absolutely demolished, not even shattered, just like ground to dust. However threadbare a lot of those illusions were anyway, for us at least, talking about the West. You know, they are just, and they're irreversibly shattered to anyone with a brain paying any attention. And then I guess there's the short and long term, or short, medium, long, whatever term question of like, okay, well, how do we live with that now? And how do we live with this situation? Even for myself, you know, like where to live? Do I even want to live in the West? How can you continue to, you know, I haven't taken a decision on that or, you know, a position necessarily, but, and, you know, the challenge of social situations, which are unavoidable, especially if, you know, working, kids, whatever. How do you interact with people who are completely ignorant, completely unknowing? How do you interact with people who you know are not ignorant, but have seemingly stopped caring or doing anything? Because, you know, such people are unavoidable. But I suppose what kind of sustains me, one of the things that sustains me is just trying to use the various layers of privilege that I have, or the platform or the resources I have to do anything like remotely useful. And, you know, whether that's being like a beneficiary for someone's fundraiser because, you know, the Western financial system is also at war with the Palestinians, and it's a complete multi-spectral war against them, whether it's PayPal, whether it's, you know, whoever. And because I've been doing quite a lot of that stuff, I'm seeing that more and more and more, just the doors being closed or not even opening in the first place, left, right, and center for so many things that people in Gaza want to do to literally survive. And it's again, I was going to say it's unbelievable. It's not. It's completely believable. But seeing it in a very direct way now, it's fucking horrific. And yeah, and I think, you know, I think that's why one of the reasons these conversations are so useful, because it's like, how do you navigate existence when this is happening? And you know, and I think some of these things obviously are questions, universal questions about existence in terms of what is important and what matters and how do you want to live your life. But I think so many of these things have just been drawn so sharply into focus and kind of seep into every interaction or experience you're having at the moment. Like my son had a nightmare, like he was in our bed and he had a nightmare last night and he screamed, like crying. And, you know, immediately that adrenaline kicks in. I was like, you know, is everything okay? Almost immediately realized, you know, he's just had a dream. He's fine. Told him he was fine. And then I just couldn't sleep for like an hour after, because I'm just thinking, I immediately thought, imagine that situation, but it's not just a dream. It's a fucking bomb. Or it's in the West Bank and it's Israeli soldiers kicking down the door to come and take me away. And I was struck with that visceral horror feeling, which I think I haven't had so much recently, or allowed myself, not in any way that I care about anything less. It's just a more bodily, overwhelming feeling. And I think I've probably said this, or some of you guys have said it. I think it's really difficult in some ways being a parent in this. You know, obviously it's difficult for anyone whether you've got kids or not, but I do think there's probably a bit of an added layer to some things as a parent, even practically as well, in terms of like, how do you talk about such things with kids and how do you interact with kids about this? But then it's also, I think, it makes certain things infinitely more difficult to see or to imagine. And there's certain things I just think you can't imagine, and it doesn't benefit you in any way or anyone else, more to the point, to do so. Like Nora, I also don't know where I'm going, but I mean, I know for sure, and I'm sure everyone probably thinks this as well, you know, I'm profoundly changed by these events in a way that, you know, we're still making sense of. And you know, it's partly for that reason that you don't even have a chance to process what happened yesterday because something's happened today. You know, the media, not that we didn't know it already, but the media reaction to the, you know, mass terror in Lebanon, it just shows you again and again and again, there is literally nothing that can be done, however horrendously evil, that will not at a minimum be tacitly justified or downplayed or whitewashed in some way, if not, as was the case in many cases with this, openly celebrated and praised. You know, and, you know, not in just overtly right-wing media. It's, you know, almost ubiquitous. And just a tiny, at risk of sounding slightly facile, I realized that we're recording when what the 1 year ago version of me would have been a major event, like Arsenal are playing Man City. And again, at risk of sounding facile to even talk about football right now, football, for better or worse, was a big part of my life, emotionally, practically. It was like the main means of bonding with my dad. You know, it wasn't just football. And almost overnight, that massive emotional, practical part of my life just went to dust. And what I find interesting, and I think some people, like friends of mine who know I feel like this, probably think it's this, but it's not. It's not like I took a moral decision and then tried to apply it to my life because that's like, oh, you know, football's disgusting. I can't, you know, it's disgusting. It's still going on, blah, blah, blah. They're not mentioning Gaza. It wasn't even that. Not that I think that would be a bad thing. It was just like an emperor's new clothes moment. I just saw it all just for what it is. And, you know, the contrast, and I'm not going to call it fucking hypocrisy because I'm so tired of that. The contrast between Ukraine and the way in which players and clubs and fans and, you know, etc. reacted to Ukraine, including Arsenal players, a little fascist prick called Zinchenko. The way in which they reacted to that, and in the absolute fucking silence of these people and these institutions, even something safe like this is a World Food Program link for Gaza, not even that. They can't even do anything. The level of disdain I feel for it all, I wouldn't have believed it a year ago. You know, I wanted to get to this point because I didn't actually want to care anymore. And, you know, for me, it's football, but for other people, it's other things. And it's like how, you know, I don't know necessarily that's going to last forever, but it definitely shows me, if I needed it, in a neat way, like how different I am currently and the state of kind of flux I'm in, trying to find what is this new version of me, basically.
I understand that, you know. I like with academics, it's like you get tenure and you know, you chase tenure for so long and then you get tenure and then there's other stuff. It's like, oh, maybe promotion to the next rank or like this grant and publication in this prestigious journal, whatever. And like they have this way where like an academic is somebody who in theory should be like able to say whatever they want and like very uncontrolled. And that's what I've always thought of as like, if there's some benefit to society to having academics, that would be it. But like they have all these ways of controlling you and like giving you these carrots and like making you chase all these silly things, which like you know, if you have to, if you have a normal, if you have a real job, so to speak, you have to chase, not getting fired every day. You have to chase like, surviving at some awful environment every day. And so like, it's so hard. It's like, I understood that that was a silly game before, but now it's just like, it's ridiculous. It's so like you're chasing accolades in a genocidal society. Like you want genocidal people to give you an award, or like you're looking for the acclaim of people who don't care. Like it just, yeah. So I fully identify with that feeling. And like, whatever, any other like small indulgences, like celebrity gossip or whatever, it'll be like, I've talked about this, it'll be like some celebrity gossip or beef, and I'm like, what are they saying about Palestine? Oh, nothing. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Slide, scroll. So yeah, I know exactly.
Can I just say one more thing? I have a special mention of disdain for, to combine things a little bit. These, and I know this has been said 100 times, but I still can't get over it. The decolonial, anti-racist
Yeah.
professionals, many of them in academia, obviously,
Yeah.
who continue to post about their little workshops and their articles and this, and it's like, you are fucking silent
Yeah.
when a colonial genocide is happening,
Right.
and you want people to take you seriously as a decolonial scholar.
Right.
It's just, or in that really egregious case, I can't actually remember her name, but the one who took that massive Zionist prize and then is tweeting about like a Walter Rodney symposium. Like,
Oh, that's why you said that. I didn't know why you said that.
no,
I
no,
saw that
she's
link.
actually not who I'm thinking of.
Okay.
I'm not going to say who I'm thinking of for complicated reasons.
I know who you're thinking of.
You might not. I don't know. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'm glad not to be of that world of academia, but I do have similar experiences of one being kind of forever changed and looking back on like how the world was, but how I think everyone was like 1 year ago, and how much has happened since then. But also, I mean, thinking back to, I mean, it wasn't y'all's first tanky therapy, but like my first tanky therapy. We were talking about, like how this wasn't gonna end within a couple months, like, and everyone will be lucky, humanity will be lucky if it ends in a couple years. And I think we're just kind of seeing that, yeah, this is a long haul struggle, and it's absolutely like many of us had thought, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better. And that's, as someone who's always trying to find the silver linings to it, like the worse that Israel responds, the greater the signs of its collapse become more apparent, right? Like if you look at the massacre in Lebanon, like that, they would not be playing that card if they didn't feel like they absolutely had to, right? And strategically, I mean, like what exactly happened was horrific, right? Like 4,000 devices exploding in people's pockets, in handbags, in markets with children at the waist height of adults, right? Um, but from a purely strategic logistical perspective, it's like either they found out that Hezbollah like had discovered some kind of flaw in their system, or they just felt like Israel needed some kind of win, right? But as many people have already pointed out, like that's this is not the time to do that. Like in the middle of a major invasion, right, is when you would want to play that massive card, and they can't play it again, right? And so that to me, like as horrible as it was, it reeks of desperation. And I think on the flip side of it, we see that Hezbollah's response, as usual, is proportional, measured, and completely in line with their strategy. And you got to imagine that it's driving settlers up a fucking wall every time Hezbollah leadership is like, and this isn't even in response to the shit that you've done to us. This is just for your recent, bombing raids, but not even like the one where you assassinated some of our lead members, right? It's not even response to the massacres. And to have that thread hanging to the point where Israeli settlers are literally like live streaming begging Nasrallah to bomb them to just be like, do it please, just so we know that it's not constantly hanging over our head. And I think it's hard to, as as I think many people just want there to be some kind of decisive major ground war to kind of like bring an end to this. Like I think like we have to constantly remind ourselves that that's not how these wars of attrition are won, especially by colonized people. It's through like a really slow bleed, and it's definitely not as cathartic. But I mean, there's going to be like a fall of Saigon situation someday, uh, and definitely within our lifetimes, definitely within this decade. And I think we just have to be patient. um, I think also I think like one thing that I think was really heartening, and I think put to bed a lot of armchair criticisms of the resistance forces, is just like seeing the way that not just members of Hezbollah but Lebanese people generally have responded to the massacre. There's one video that I sent that really struck me emotionally. And I haven't witnessed, I personally, like a level of solidarity since Yemeni people kind of responded to being bombed by Israel. Um, yeah, just um a woman in Lebanon, and presumably Hezbollah soldier, I think. They both lost one of their eyes in the recent attacks, and the way that they respond to it is just like, like, it's a loose translation, but our insight is still enlightened. That's more important than eyesight. Um, the wife says, "My soul's beloved, he is the eye that I have left." And then I think one of their mothers says, "Gaza, we won't leave you, even if all of our eyes will be gone." And I think people who have kind of like casually critiqued Hezbollah in particular for not responding enough, I think that should put any of those criticisms to bed. Like, and I challenge anyone living in the West who has any kind of armchair military strategic critiques for Hezbollah to like honestly ask themselves, would you give up an eye for Palestine? Because I feel like most people actually wouldn't.
And they were lining up. Apparently, there were people in Lebanon who were trying to donate their eyes, and I don't think you
And
can
kidneys.
donate eyes.
Yeah.
You can donate kidneys, but I think they were told by the hospital, like, no, we don't actually do
Yeah,
eye.
can you imagine that happening in the United States? Like if there was like another 9/11, like and there was a need for like, yeah, like an organ as vital as an eye, and honestly, like in Western healthcare system, there might actually be a way to do that, right?
Yeah.
With the right uh machinery and doctors, but like I don't see people in the U.S. lining up to donate their eyes. Like that is such a dramatic uh uh quality of life change. But I mean, just the fact that Lebanese people were lining up willing to do that, I mean, it's a level of community and solidarity that I think is unimaginable in the way that we've been raised and indoctrinated in the West.
I could
We
see
were told to
American
go shopping.
politicians. Yeah, I
We
could
were
I
we
could
were
see
told to go
American
shopping
go
after
That's
that.
shopping.
right.
Yeah. That's how
America
you
is
help your
open for
neighbors.
business. That
That's how
was
you
the
help your
tagline.
neighbors. You
Yeah.
stay calm and go shopping. I think they'd send thoughts and prayers, though. I think they'd probably be willing to send thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
Can I just something that Louis said I just like to mention is the fact that yeah, I feel change since October 7th. It's definitely it. And the thing that's infuriating to me often is I look at people and say, how could this not have changed you? You see what people are doing, and it's like they're trying so hard to remain the same. Like there's one Jacobin writer who said, well, obviously, given the catastrophe, he said that's happened, obviously the October 7th attacks were wrong, and opposed. All the things you could conclude from October 7th. Like, obviously, the establishment of Israel was a monstrosity. It should have been overthrown decades ago. That's a conclusion you could draw. But he draws a conclusion that allows him just to remain exactly the same, just sucking up to the Democratic Party. I do not want to change, and I'll look for any argument. Doesn't matter how stupid it is, just to stay exactly the same. And the other thing I want to mention is about propaganda. We were talking about propaganda. I honestly feel like the West has given up on propaganda. I don't think they're trying very hard at all. I mean, with the pager attack, celebrating it, all that stuff. I mean, Alan McLeod on Twitter pointed out to one BBC headline that referred to the Hezbollah pager attack. Like the headline was so ridiculous. He was deliberately trying to make it sound like it was an attack Hezbollah did rather than Israel. And I think that's one of the few attempts at deception, because propaganda is about deception, but it seems like the propaganda is now just about openly just admitting what they are and saying, well, what are you going to do about it? We're going to celebrate, we're going to threaten protesters. I mean, that's not intelligent propaganda. In my opinion, that's just more or less baiting your populace and saying, well, okay, if you don't like what we're doing, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? Just like just open thug behavior. It's not, in my opinion, it's not really propaganda in the sense of convincing people that your side is good or anything. And the other thing, there was another tweet I noticed by somebody who it irritated me, because she said something like, the world is responsible for what's going on in Gaza. We're not, there's no outrage. This is this pager attack. Where's the outrage? We're not doing anything. And she's blamed the whole world, right? And I said, well, that's not right. The government's already not the world. They don't. But then I was thinking, well, on some level, that's not that far off, because I mean, human beings have been around for thousands. Civilized human civilization has been around for thousands of years, and this is where we're at. We're watching a live stream genocide. So, on some level, actually, yeah, human beings, are as a species, we failed, right? I mean, if the world ended, I mean, if there was a massive holocaust of the entire planet, and an extraterrestrial civilization came back and looked at us, they'd pass judgment on the whole species, not just the governments, right? It would end and they say, well, and I think about, what does the propaganda rely on? What do our leaders rely on? They rely on our apathy, and they rely on our worst instincts. Um, and so it gets back to this question, I think, about, we talk about human nature, but we also have to think about more, maybe it's more useful to think about human potential. Like, what do we have the potential to be? And when you mentioned people wanting to give up their eyes, maybe that's a more useful thing to think about. What we have that potential, and that's what you cling to. We have the potential to be better. We have the potential to be heroic and all these wonderful things that we see in the victims. And I think maybe that's what we have to cling to, the assumption that we can spread that human potential everywhere somehow. That's basically what we have to cling to. That's what I cling to. We have to work on the assumption that we can overcome all the things that are leading us to a fucking Holocaust, not just in Gaza, but in the whole planet.
Not just of humans, but of non-humans as well, our companions. Alex,
I love that, like, DMX track, like, cosign from Joe's dog there.
That was Rough Riders right there. I always like on Tanky Therapy or in our chat when Joe starts something with somebody irritated me, like I know the next part's going to be amazing. And anyway, so it's always good. What can I say? I'm teaching. I'm back on campus. There's a lot less of those carrots that you're talking about, Justin. There's a lot more sticks. On my campus, we still have students suspended from what happened with the encampment effort at my university. You know, students who are going to be suspended well into next year, right? Completely interrupt their academic career and learning out of spite. I mean, you know, and there's a small group of us who are trying to help and provide assistance and support and camaraderie. And like, that's the conclusion is that these students are being targeted because they had the temerity to stand up to a university administration who told them not to do something. At our university, it lasted less than a day. But just that one effort led to dozens of police cars from 4 or 5 different police corporate bodies, drones being flown overhead. It was just anyway. So I think there's a lot more sticks, and we've seen it throughout, at least in the U.S., throughout university campuses. That video that went viral with the Defense League freaks at what was the University of Toronto, at UCLA or the University of California Regents are asking for more weapons to be used against their students because they're expecting protests, which is really insane to think about. Like, these universities in the US hate their students, right? So these universities are actually not about students and learning, as we now well know. They're about real estate or hedge fund, capital accumulation, whatever. It's becoming really apparent what the purpose of higher education is in the United States. But I'm teaching a Latin American revolutions class, and I'm teaching the Haitian Revolution right now. And it's interesting to think about how this last year has changed the way I teach it. Because it's about Haiti, but it's also about something else. And there's so many connections that I stumble across as I'm preparing a lecture, or even with what students are saying during class. But there's one thing that stood out to me in this history, preparing for next week's lectures, is that these ex-slaves turned revolutionaries fought to prevent the return of slavery to their island for 7-8 years. And tens of thousands of people died defending that. They defeated the British Empire, they defeated the Spanish Empire. And then it only got worse, right? In 1802, Napoleon Bonaparte sends over his best troops, his brother-in-law, and they capture, and they kidnap, and they send in chains to a prison in France the leader of this revolutionary process, Toussaint Louverture. And that's the darkest moment. It's the most violent period in the history of the Haitian revolutions, from like 1802 until they declare victory at the end of 1803 and declare Haitian independence in 1804. It's just that the worst part, the most violent part, happened at the very end. The worst atrocities. They lost their leader, and then their next best leaders all switched over and fought with the French for a little bit until they turned against the French again and led this final phase for Haitian independence. And then this country continues to be punished to this day because they had the temerity to create a Black state that was anti-racist, anti-capitalist, and anti-slavery. And they're still paying for it. If you followed this ridiculous genocidal U.S. discourse on immigrants and what
And on
they've been doing
voodoo,
to Haitian immigrants, right?
and on the
Yeah,
voodoo religion, the Haitian voodoo religion.
right.
You're still
Totally.
parroting the slave owners' take on their religion.
Well, that's my point. I mean, if you read what the colonizers were saying about the Haitians in real time, there's a lot of similarities with what was written about Palestinian resistance after October 7th. A few days after October 7th last year, I tweeted something where I said, I'm really glad Twitter wasn't around during the Haitian Revolution, because we know what it would look like, right? To your example, Justin, about Twitter being around during World War II, we now know what would have been circulated. We know the defense, and in the Haitian case, these tropes still continue to this day. Like, one of the things I always have to push back with my students is like, no, white genocide is not a thing. It doesn't exist. And it did not take place in Haiti in 1804. No, the Haitian revolutionaries are not marching around with a white child's head on a pike, and they were not massively raping white slave owners. It's the same tropes, the same arguments, right? Like Fanon has that famous line about, for the native, objectivity is always like used against the native. It's the same burden. We see it with the pager tag. Like, what have I learned from US mainstream media and social media in the last 2 weeks about Hezbollah? They're evil incarnate. They're the worst thing ever. We should not be cheering them on. We should not be on their side. Sounds familiar about what we've been living through in the last year. So yeah, no, someone else made an interesting point on Twitter where they said, okay, about the pager attack. And again, I thought about this in the Haitian situation. They said, okay, I got it. Exploding pagers in an instance of mass terror. That's clever. That's innovative. That's ingenious. But paragliders are not. Right. In the Haitian case, these a massive secret clandestine organization of plantation slaves under the very nose of the slave owners, using voodoo as a way to organize people across religious and tribal and political polity lines to create a massive slave insurrection. That's not ingenious. That's not innovative. Right. It's just, I keep going to this, right? I think I've mentioned it before. Eduardo Galeano has this book called The World Turned Upside Down. And that's what I feel like we've been living through. And that's what makes it hard for me to kind of situate myself. This is to what you were saying, Louis. It makes it really hard for me to, I don't know, like to find coordinates for which, like, to political, ideological coordinates to help situate where I am in an everyday level. So this is for me why our chats, our tanky therapy, just knowing you guys has helped me so much. Because I know when I see some batshit crazy thing flash across my cell phone screen, I'm like, all right, I know who I'm going to send this to, and it's going to be cool, and they're going to understand it, and I don't have to explain it. Like, they
Except to
get it.
say, here's some violence for you this afternoon.
Well, that's come on. That's Joe's role is to do the flamethrower. I guess I provide a little bit of violence for everybody. But yeah, I think that's it. And Louis, like your point about football, about your kids, it's the similar thing. I used to be much more passionate about my football teams, and whether they would win or lose would like affect my mood stupidly. And it's not the same. Nothing's ever going to be the same after this year as we approach like the 1 year. Nothing's ever the same. And I've made this point before. We knew this intellectually. We knew this politically, but living through it and witnessing it and hearing it from people I know, people who I used to be close to, or from, all these psychopath genocide apologists that we have to, watch in podiums trying to from the US government trying to justify what's going on. Everything's different. Everything's changed. I have changed in a way that I don't know if it's for better or worse. But I do know that I'm applying a lot of tests to people, individuals, like you were saying, Justin, about whether they care about something that I care deeply about. If they don't, I don't have time for you. I don't give a shit what you think, honestly. But there's cost to that. And I see it with my friends who there's a lot of self-censorship. These conservatives in the US talk about there's a campaign of self-censorship against them, against poor conservatives in the United States. But you see it with people who are afraid to speak up about this for obvious reasons. And it's always
Yeah,
in
and if they're
whispered,
not
hushed tones.
if they're not speaking about it now, they're never going to speak about it. They're never
Yeah.
like Louis said, like this is genocide. Like if you're
Yeah.
if you're too scared, if this is not bad enough to make you speak about it, you're
Right.
you're domesticated. You're just yeah.
This is a moment, right? This is a moment to demonstrate congruity, I think, ideologically, politically, I don't know, humanistically, depending on who you are, especially if you're not a fucking academic, accepting the world's most lucrative history prize, $200,000, and then, I'm going to organize a Walter Rodney conference, which I mean, that's just insane to me. And this person rightfully got a lot of pushback, but they're at an Ivy League university writing about black radicalism. They're going to be fine. But not the dozens of contingent faculty who have lost their jobs because they did have the courage to speak out against an ongoing colonial genocide. But we'll see what happens in my little space on campus. I think there is going to be a lot more sticks. That's quite clear. And it looks like over the last summer, these universities were all plotting and organizing together in expectation of another round of protests. And we'll see what happens around October 7th. But that's like their next flashpoint that I've seen different university presidents or leadership talking about. The last thing I'll say is, and this is, I think you mentioned this, Justin, in our chat, but first of all, I never thought I was going to be a Macklemore fan, but now obviously I am. And that listening to, as soon as I saw, I can't remember who tweeted out, like, or maybe it must have been Macklemore's account on social media saying, "Hey, Hinds Hall's 2 has just dropped," and listening to it and that transition midway through the song with the chant, it's just like man, like it's a combination of like chills and tears and motivation to keep going. And his that 2.5 minutes, the last 2.5 minutes on that song, um, I don't know. I've been listening to it every day. It's a good reminder what this is about.
That moment where he goes, "What happened to us?" The minute that Hind Rajab is on the screen. Yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about my own like inability to feel and process grief in the last year, but that it seems so like, I don't know, it's almost embarrassing. Like I'm almost ashamed to say that like that kind of like uh it 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 actually did make me cry like that, you know. I mean, the beat goes hard and his lyrics are phenomenal, and it's just going and going, and then all of a sudden, what happened to us, right? And like even just saying it, I'm getting
Yeah.
goosebumps
He just
with
couldn't.
with
He couldn't
Hind's
keep.
little
He
face,
he
right?
couldn't keep going. Like he
Yeah,
was like full of steam and he just ran out. And I
yeah,
just exactly understand that feeling.
yeah. And yeah, that was I think it just helped articulate a lot of what we've been feeling. Of like, yeah, what happened to in all sorts of, I've been thinking about that over the last few days, like in all sorts of ways. What happened to us in terms of like overall humanity,
Yeah.
but also what happened to us personally? You know,
Mhm.
all of us on this call right now, like what you were saying, Louis, like how we are constantly recalibrating how we respond to both, you know, like unbelievable acts of sadistic torture that we're seeing live streamed on our phone, and also our kids waking up in the middle of the night having nightmares, and like and how we've been irrevocably changed by this, individually, collectively, on this like wider scale. Yeah, that was, I don't know, like, yeah,
It,
again, like I never thought I would be,
it's like
but here we are.
it's like, I read a lot about psychology and like mental illnesses, and like, I've heard analogies like if you're schizophrenic, like you hear voices all the time. It's like they have like headphones where you can, it's not really exactly like this, but like they try to explain it to people. Or like if you're depressed, or if you have an addiction, it feels like a monkey on your, you've all heard that, like a monkey on your back and stuff. And it's like I have that like in normal life. Like I'll be going into a meeting and I'll just be like, there's a big part of my brain that's like on genocide right now. Like I have genocide brain, and I just have to like perform. I have to like pretend like I'm in a normal situation in a normal meeting, and it's just like this whole thing is churning in the background.
That's the
And
right verb, perform. Like
Yeah.
the
yeah,
smallest
yeah,
things feel like
yeah,
a performance, and then you resent the performance, and you think,
yeah,
why
Oh,
the
yeah.
fuck
it's,
am I
yeah, it feels
performing?
dirty, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I like my phrase, like how you have like a little phrase my phrase is like, well, this is my life now. Like this is my life now. This is my life now.
On the flip side of that too, I mean, I definitely have less qualms about doing this because I mean, at this point, I'm just kind of like at peace with the fact that I'm just doing it all the time now. Like, particularly with friend groups who just don't know anything about the genocide. You know, I feel like, was it Rachel Dratch's character on SNL, Debbie Downer, where it's just like, today, like, the IOF shut down Al Jazeera in Ramallah, and I'm like, wah, and just like no matter what the conversation was, just everything's just brought down by it.
Yeah.
But I feel like people like deserve that. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
if you're not plugged in, like it's like sorry, like you can't enjoy things. Well, I feel like we should still be able to enjoy the good things that life brings, but I also feel like we don't get to pretend like this isn't happening at every hour of every day. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember last Thanksgiving, people circulated that speech that Chavez had given years before. And they're like, me, anytime there's a pause in the conversation. And Chavez is like, I'd just like to take this moment to denounce the cursed state of Israel. I'm like, and you're just waiting for a break in the conversation. Just jump in with that.
Legend, that guy.
Terrorista, asesino. Maldita sea Estado de Israel. Sina, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I guess well, this was a Debbie Downer episode. All of you are like on 6 pounds of Valium, it sounds like. I am also holding a Chihuahua.
Not enough.
So it's like my lap is very hot, and I didn't sit on a pillow, and I'm sitting on like a solid wood bench, so I'm very sore. And so that's my initial response to how I'm doing. No, I'm listening to this. I'm hearing a lot of like, yeah, a lot of what goes through my head. Like, how do you go about your life? I'm lucky insofar as I live a completely independent life. Like, I live, first of all, in the middle of nowhere, and I barely see people. So, as you know, from behind me, like quails are a lot of my companions. And although it's hunting season, so there's more people around, and you hear the gunshots actually, and it does fuck with you a little bit. You're like, wow, like that was one single gunshot, and it like had such force and such violence, like underwriting it, and you just think of the scale. And yeah, like that's my brain, like my brain all day, every day. It's the weight of all this. It's the thinking around like, how do I situate my own role in any of this? And like, okay, yeah, I run these media platforms, we talk about it. That's like more than 95 99% of our fucking wasteless, useless societies, by the way. But sorry, ADD moment. I did have something to say though about, this is the main thesis of what I want to contribute today, is that I want to say something. Our society did not change on October 7th. Our society is the exact same as it was like on October 6th, and it hasn't changed. Is that this what Israel, like what, like, you know, Al-Aqsa flood did is, yes, it turned the world upside down, and it forced, you know, and Mikey put it once, like long ago, I think it was for Red Nation, about how, like, you know, the mask had to come off, and not just like of the Zionists, you know, oh, we have vegan boots for our most moral armies. Not just that. That's an easy mask that comes off. It's come off many, many times before. But the entire machinery of the West, right? And now we're so used to it being like, oh, genocide and never again. And like, but the thing is, like, before October 7th, we knew that was all bullshit too. That like the foundations of this society are genocide. That like, and like that everything about it like supports Israel, because Israel is a part of its own DNA, not because like Jews and whatever and this and that. And Israel is a part of the same Western project. They're all cut from the same whatever sourdough mother, whatever you want, a metaphor you want to use. Like that's like, this is the same project repeated over and over again. Now, how it unfolds, yes, is like different. And the degrees to which Israel's own belatedness, at like Zionism's belatedness, is that it arrived far too late, and it didn't finish the job that it tasked itself with, right? Namely, the expulsion of these indigenous peoples, these, you know, like a lot of indigenous peoples, upwards of 1 million, and dispel them basically permanently, and they didn't do it. So like this 75 years later, we're living in the aftermath of that failure. And the fact that they haven't given up on that project of expelling these indigenous people, right? Like the way colonialism does is that it's like, it's relentless. It's a multi-generational, international, global project. But I just think about the fact that like in the history of settler colonialism, like there's never been as hard of a project as Zionism, right? Like Zionism is like the contra of settler colonialism. You cannot beat that thing. Like you cannot accomplish what they want to accomplish, what they need to accomplish. You cannot. You have to have constant flows of people, weapons, money. You need to have an entire like parallel economy set up for it, right, to keep it going. This thing is a very expensive addendum to the West. Now, is it important to the West's geopolitical aims? Absolutely. Are they willing to pay that cost? Yes. Are they willing to blow up the entire planet in doing so? I'm not sure of that yet. I can't, I guess we'll know. We'll know soon enough. This stuff that's happening in Lebanon is incredibly rapid. I am afraid of what this means for Lebanese people, obviously. I mean, they've already been suffering a lot since for all of this. And, you know, frankly, we people like us in our own position probably haven't done enough content dedicated to those people and to those struggles. And partly because of the insanity around Hezbollah, the incomplete sort of discursive hexing around Hezbollah, how this uniform sort of caucus of hate in the media, professional NGO core, even ostensibly pro-Palestine people, right? That like that Qatar-funded wing of the Palestine Liberation Project hates Hezbollah just as much as the Zionists do, guys. And like that's part of why we saw so like, you know, God, I mean, you know, obviously I know Palestinians support Hezbollah in large measure, in great measure, but the media class that emerged from, you know, the Oslo Accords has put a certain group of people in charge speaking for Palestinians who, to put it lightly, you know, carry somewhat of an anti-Iran, anti-Hezbollah, you know, like bias. And so like partly what's
Syria,
happened is that like
anti-Syria.
the anti-Syria, and that's part of it too, right? And like partly what's happened is that the sacrifices that are happening at the wider margins of this already running regional war, this regional war that's been running for 75 years, possibly 100, which I include the so-called Arab revolt in the beginnings as the beginning point of Zionism, at least in the region, because in a sense that like that was, or at least the war for Zionism, the war for imperialism. I don't know. I'm not like a bookends guy, but at the very least, that period that we've like passed 100 years now, we're coming up to 105, and like the aftermath of which we are living in, that they tried with everything to extinguish the flame of Palestine through doing everything, torturing Gaza. And in the final analysis, they couldn't put down like this indigenous uprising. And this indigenous uprising that threw over their entire establishment, that had nothing, they couldn't stop it. So they killed hundreds of their own people, and they had to resort to this insanely wave of violence and genocide for over a year, destroying their economy, destroying the basis of their own society, destroying the like very fabric of everything that keeps them going. Like they don't care. They need to destroy their enemy more than they need to preserve themselves. And that's why we're in this really dangerous place, because it's one thing to approach Gaza with that Hitlerite mentality. It's one thing to do that to a, you know, concentration camp or like a basically a prison camp for people that have been kept out, like besieged for decades now, and before that starved and kept under wraps. It's hard enough to pull that off, and they're trying to do that to the West Bank too, but they can't do that to Lebanon. Lebanon broke free of their yoke, prepared itself for this. Like the scale of all this is so crazy, guys. We like, to just change the energy a little bit, like, yeah, this is awful that we have to watch this. This is awful that more awful, obviously, that Palestinians have to undergo this. But remember, we get to watch for the rest of our lives, like footage from October 7th, like those paragliding heroes who changed history, global history, some like this orphan army, right? Like they are an orphan army, Kassam, right? And waging from the depths of one of the most besieged and brutalized places, and they upended their nuclear armed enemy to the point where their enemy has lost its mind, chewing on its own, you know, like elbow, destroying itself, trying to like get at its own, like trying to destroy this enemy, which it can't achieve nothing, accomplish nothing. And the genocide is just an attempt to show, to flex, and to keep their people together. So the scale of all this is mind-boggling. Yeah, like the violence, those images, like those bombs in Lebanon, that was just like one of a year of these things. But that spectacular violence is all imperialism has now. It can't control the market. It can't control all of the finance. It can't control all of the weapons. It can't control all of the shipping routes, right? But what it can do is provide a kind of media sphere that's all encompassing, that's surrounding us, that marinates us, that forces us into these tiny little corners, which they ban us, by the way. They banned RT off of TikTok, by the way. Any kind of critical voices, anybody presenting a sort of alternative gets smushed like a bug. I mean, look what they did to EI. That, oh, by the way, that's EI. That's the first freaking, we all know this, obviously. That's the shot across the bow for EI. Like, you know, they're gunning for EI because of what it does. The
Our
same way
time
they
will
gun for
come.
Palestinian journalists. Yeah, like, and
All of our
tanky
times will
therapy will
come.
come too. Yeah. I mean, yeah, like this is something that directly affects us. Like they hunt journalists, they hunt media figures. You know, I wouldn't, you know, so I feel like, yeah, it's we have to go through a bunch, we have to go through all the emotions together if we're gonna do this kind of show. Like we have to have like the like shock and
Yeah.
like the kind of like bewilderment of like these things that we've seen, but we also have to keep stock of like whatever forest through the trees or the grander whatever backdrop of all of this. And yeah, like human history is long, it's full of wars. I mean, yeah, is this war unique in them? I think so, pretty sure it is. But like colonial powers have come and go, right? But indigenous people live on and they fight, and this is like a heroic indigenous struggle, the scale of which we've never seen. I don't think we've seen an indigenous resistance force as tough as Qassam, as Hezbollah, and you know,
Yeah, maybe Haiti.
so
Maybe
it's
Haiti's the only
yeah,
other. Yeah.
yeah, Haiti, yeah. I mean, this is something, and so in the midst of all this violence that like we can't, that's scarring us, understandably, like we have to also keep the broader picture here, and like
Can
the
I
reason why they do this violence is to erase the historic challenge, like the historic changes that
Oh,
some orphan army like undid them all.
I
I
want
feel
to
like
oh,
Sina
go ahead.
Sina just de-escalated through escalation. That's what you did with your final.
Good one.
Oh,
No,
This
but
It
I
this
was
is
want
what
actually
you just
Daisy
did,
who did it
Sina.
all.
that was
It was
beautiful.
actually
Daisy,
she's
thank you,
so
wanna-
Daisy.
warm.
I have two I have two other thoughts to conclude on.
You're
One
so
is
quiet. I could not hold my dog in my lap.
Louis, have you seen Andor, the Star Wars
Go,
show
Chica.
Andor?
I have, yeah.
You know that when I just when we were talking about performance, I was thinking about this guy and how he behaves in his shop. And
Yeah.
like there's a part where he like goes to the back of the shop and he kind of has to compose himself and then he comes out with this kind of grin. And that's like
I remember that scene.
that's literally how I feel at work. Um, that's how I feel. But the other thing I wanted to share, like in line with what Sina was saying, because you guys know that like Syed Abdel Malik Badruddin Al Houthi gives a speech every Thursday, but he knew that Nasrallah was going to speak on Thursday, so he deferred his speech to Saturday. And so I was listening to his speech last night, and his speech was mostly about Yemen. His speech was mostly about the revolution, what he calls the September Revolution. And I had these vivid memories of like our show that we did, Nora, on Yemen, like for the brief, and like when we were
Yeah.
researching Yemen, and it was like, you know, a long time ago, like 2015, you know, around then. And we were just like the way that I followed Yemen, what I thought Yemen was gonna be like was like, you know, famine and genocide and forever Saudi war and just like that's how it was gonna be. And we were gonna watch these starving children and they were gonna just maybe partition Yemen and just destroy Yemen forever. Yemen was just gonna be destroyed forever. And now Yemen is like launching hypersonic missiles, giving addresses, orienting the whole resistance, and like blockading the entire Israeli economy. And like, yeah. So I was just like, this is not where I thought I would be. This is not like, I did not think I'd be listening to the Houthi leader, like, just like break down how things were gonna, the overall strategy for resisting Israel. So, yeah, that's my escalation, de-escalation contribution for the end of today's session. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone.